All right, so good morning. This is part 3 of our discussion about exporting and kind of finding target markets. And back to our target markets program from Westwind Group, we're still on step number 1, using key trade data and analytics to determine market potential. And then we're going to talk a little bit about key factors that would increase the ability to sell your product. So what we did is we actually went through our same discussion we're going through with the beer exports. And we're going to look at some trade data. We actually have a different set of data we can pull up, a different aggregate that we use besides the free data. We have some personal kind of data we actually pay for here. And you can see this is actually a pull up a screenshot of the data that we use. These are the top markets for beer. This is the exports from the United States to these markets. The first thing we do is we look at the world trends and who's buying this. Because a lot of our clients are American, we're going to use the American model just to kind of show you, and you can do this with any country really, but we'll show you from the American perspective. These are the top markets for imports of beer from the United States to these markets. And no surprise whatsoever, the top 2 markets are Canada and Mexico. Number 3 is Chile, then the United Kingdom and Sweden, and so on and so forth. The first thing that we do with this data is we need to figure out trends for the future. We do this a lot with the data sets, but what we really want to figure out is there a market potential? Is there growth? Is there contraction? Is there expansion? What happened? What is going on in the market that can help us figure out how to sell some more product there? If there's a decline in the market, it might be getting tight. If there's an increase, it might be getting better. So what we do is we kind of look at a 3-year aggregate with some of the data we use. This is actually a service we provide at Westwind Group with our Target Markets program. If a company signs up with our Target Markets program, we do all this data for a company. We can actually pull this, look at trends, figure out the factors and key influences that a company should be thinking about on the international market, and then place the product in the market. What we're looking at here are 3 different things. We want to look at the trends over the past few years on the market side. We also want to look at the potential in the future. So as you can see, from 2013 to 2014, 2014 to 2015 and 16 and so on, we have a couple markets where there has been a decrease, notably the first 2. Everything has been a decrease except for 2014-15 in Mexico, but everything's kind of been on the downturn. So what we want to do is we really want to find markets where there's an upturn or there's a potential to sell more. Just so happens that number 3, Chile, is importing more beer. In fact, it's importing about $3.5 million more beer in 2015 than it did in 2014. Year to date, this number is very, very telling. We're probably going to be looking at another uptrend of beer in Chile in 2016 as well. Same thing with year-to-date numbers for the United Kingdom and also the year-to-date numbers for Sweden. And you can see the numbers over here influence that and actually attribute to that. You don't see any negatives here. You actually see positives all the way up. A little decline in the number, but we're actually gaining a lot in the market in the United Kingdom. Might go down just a little bit because of what's happening with Brexit right now, but we just really don't know that for detail. And then you see some markets are staying the same, Taiwan and Korea. Now, the next thing that we want to do is we want to make this as easy as possible for a company to figure out their export markets. So what we do as an organization is we want to figure out the free trade agreements that are available for a U.S. company to do business in a market. Why is this important? Finding your free trade agreement markets makes it easier to get the product in, but also an understanding between the governments of those customs processes between the 2 markets. So for instance, beer imports from America to, let's say, Chile, the 2 organizations got together and they discussed, here are the processes we use for beer in the United States, what do you use in Chile? And make sure they're similar so companies have an easier access to the market. It doesn't mean all the costs are taken out, but it means a large chunk of the duties and tariffs are taken out on this product. What we tell companies is, if you're in the United States, you want to go close and you want to go free trade. It just so happens that these markets are all in the Western Hemisphere, these 3 top ones, and Chile is at the bottom of the Western Hemisphere, but it's easy to get to from the United States. So the next thing we want to really look at is free trade agreements. So what we did is we went over to the USTR's website, Office of the U.S. Trade Representative, and we figured out all of the current free trade agreements that are going on for the U.S. There are a few at the bottom here, the TPP, which is coming up, and the TTIP, which is the Transatlantic Partnership with the European Union. That's a long way off. TPP is much closer. But here are the current markets that have a free trade agreement with the U.S. in some form or fashion. And it just so happens that Chile, Mexico, and Canada, our top 3 markets, have a free trade agreement with the U.S. No surprise there. But some interesting ones that you probably didn't know of: Jordan has a free trade agreement with the U.S. Korea, which is South Korea, has a free trade agreement with the U.S. Oman has a free trade agreement, Peru, Singapore, etc. So, using this data, we know that Canada, Mexico, Chile have a free trade agreement. Canada, Australia have a free trade agreement. Korea and Honduras have a free trade agreement. So most of the countries in the top 10 of the markets have a free trade agreement with the U.S. Actually, top 12. China's on the upswing. We don't really know about this data. Sometimes it can be funny. All of a sudden it goes from this to this. So we're really not worried about that. But of your top 10 markets, 7 of your top 10 markets have a free trade agreement with the U.S. So using that data, we can actually figure out that the landed costs are pretty much going to be our shipping costs, but also importing costs are going to be limited. You're just going to have a VAT tax in some markets, which they pass on to their consumers or not. The easiest way to figure out markets where you need to figure out the what is called the tariff or the customs tariff in those markets is you pretty much can go to any country's website and look up the tariff market. I just so happen to pull up, this is the U.S. tariff market, very easy to do, 22030, and you can figure out exactly what is going on in the market, what the prices are. Here's beer made from malt. It is free, and actually, if we pull this over, pull this over here so you can see this, beer from malt is free except for an excise tax, which is a federal excise tax. And if it's a non-country where we don't have a rate of duty agreement with, you have a 1% excise tax and a 13 cents per liter. So if I'm importing a beer from, let's say, China, that would be a good example. If there's a Chinese beer or a Japanese beer I'm importing, I'm going to be charged 13 cents per liter plus a federal excise tax. So each market is individually specific. You can figure out which markets work for you as a company. But what we really want to do is focus on the fact that if you are doing business overseas or this is your first time exporting, look for markets as a U.S. exporter that have a free trade agreement with the U.S. Start with these markets as long as they're in the top 10 of your data set. Start with those markets and figure out how you can import to those markets, because the cost of doing business is so much easier than the cost of trying to go to a market where we don't have a free trade agreement, maybe somewhere like Germany or Norway. There is a good market potential, but you really want to focus on markets where you can get your product in quickly, easily, and very effectively. So that's the end of day 3 for us for this part series. We're going to focus on next part series. We're going to plan the landed cost all the way through, and then we're going to do a market survey discussion of your channel partners.